1 month after my daughter Sarah's wedding to the perfect man. The photographer called me in the middle of the night. His voice was trembling so hard I could barely understand him. "Mr. Bennett," he stammered, "you need to come to my studio right now. I noticed something terrible in the raw files. Do not tell your daughter. Do not tell anyone. Just come." What he showed me on his high-definition monitor that night did not just break my heart. It shattered my reality. It turned a fairy tale marriage into a horror story. I thought I was looking at wedding photos. I was actually looking at crime scene evidence. And the victims were me and my only child. Before I tell you what I saw in that dark room, please subscribe to the channel if you have ever had a gut feeling that someone was lying to you. I am Howard Bennett. I am 70 years old. Most people in this town know me as the quiet retiree who walks his golden retriever around the park and tips the waitress too much at the local diner. They see a harmless old man in a cardigan who spends his days tending to his rose garden and visiting his wife Catherine's grave. They have no idea who I really used to be. They do not know that I was the chief architect who designed half the skyline of this city. They do not know about the $20 million sitting in offshore accounts that I worked 40 years to build. And they certainly do not know that before I drew blueprints, I carried a rifle in the Marine Corps. I kept my past and my wealth hidden for a reason. I wanted a simple life for my daughter Sarah. I wanted her to be loved for who she was, not for the inheritance she would one day receive. When she brought Liam home 6 months ago, I thought my prayers had been answered. Liam was charming, a self-made entrepreneur with a dazzling smile and a firm handshake. He treated Sarah like a queen. And his mother, Patricia, was the picture of elegance. A wealthy widow from the East Coast, who seemed to adore Sarah just as much. The wedding was spectacular. I paid for everything, of course. It was the happiest day of Sarah's life. But 1 month later, sat in my study staring at a cold cup of tea, the phone rang. It was Leo, the wedding photographer. Leo was a good kid, an artist with a sharp eye for detail. I picked up the phone, expecting him to ask about the final album selection. "Mr. Bennett," Leo whispered. The fear in his voice was palpable. It scraped against my ear. "Leo, it is 11 at night," I said, shifting in my leather chair. "Is everything all right?" "No, sir," he said. "Nothing is all right. I was editing the batch from the reception, the candid shots, the ones in the background. Sir, I saw something. I zoomed in and... Oh, God. You need to see this." "Just email them to me, Leo," I said, reaching for my glasses. "I cannot," he insisted. "You have to see the high resolution, and you have to see it here." "If I send these over the internet and someone intercepts them, please, Mr. Bennett, come to the studio, now, and whatever you do, do not tell Sarah. Her life might depend on it." That last sentence hit me like a physical blow. Her life might depend on it. I did not ask another question. I hung up the phone and grabbed my car keys. Outside, a storm was battering the city. Rain lashed against the windshield of my old sedan as I navigated the slick streets. The wipers slapped back and forth, a rhythmic countdown to a disaster I could feel in my bones. I drove with the precision of a man who had navigated combat zones, my mind racing. Was Liam cheating on her? Was that it? Had Leo caught the groom kissing a bridesmaid? That would be painful, yes. That would break Sarah's heart. But Leo had said her life was in danger. That implied something far darker than infidelity. I arrived at Leo's studio in the industrial district 20 minutes later. The building was dark, except for a single light in the storefront. I hammered on the glass door. Leo unlocked it immediately and ushered me in, locking the deadbolt behind me. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, his hands shaking as he led me to his workstation. "Sit down, Mr. Bennett," he said, pulling up a chair. "I need you to brace yourself." "Just show me, Leo," I said, my voice dropping to that low, commanding tone I hadn't used since I ran construction sites. Leo tapped a few keys. The large 4K monitor on his desk flickered to life. "This is the first one," Leo said. "It was taken in the back corridor of the hotel, near the service elevators. This was while the speeches were happening in the main ballroom. Everyone was distracted." I leaned in, squinting at the image. It was dark, but Leo's camera had a high ISO setting. It had captured everything in the shadows. There were two figures pressed against the wall. It was Liam and Patricia. I stared at the image, my mind trying to rearrange the pieces of the last 6 months. The way they looked at each other across the dinner table. The way they sometimes disappeared at the same time. I had interpreted it as a close family bond. I had been a fool. They were con artists, grifters playing a role. "But why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why go through all this trouble? Why marry Sarah?" Leo clicked the mouse. "Because of this, sir." The next photo appeared. This one was taken in the main ballroom, just moments before the champagne toast. The angle was from behind a large floral arrangement. It captured the head table where Sarah and Liam were sitting. But Liam wasn't there. He was mingling. Sarah was laughing at something a guest was saying, looking away from her glass. And there, standing right behind Sarah's chair, was Patricia. She was dressed in that expensive silver gown she had bragged about. She looked elegant, poised, but the camera had caught her right hand, hovering over Sarah's crystal champagne flute. Between her thumb and forefinger, she was holding a tiny, translucent packet. A stream of white powder was falling from the packet into the golden bubbles of my daughter's drink. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. "She is drugging her," I hissed. Leo nodded grimly. "I checked the timestamps, Mr. Bennett. This was 5 minutes before Sarah gave her speech. Do you remember what happened during the speech?" I remembered. God help me, I remembered. Sarah had stood up, looking radiant. She had started to thank everyone, and then she had swayed. She had slurred her words. She had giggled and said she must have had too much wine on an empty stomach. Everyone laughed. It was charming. But then she had to sit down because she felt dizzy. We all thought it was just nerves and alcohol, but it wasn't. It was poison. "Is there more?" I asked, my voice cold as ice. "One more," Leo said. He brought up the third image. This one was taken later in the night. The party was in full swing. I remembered this moment. I had left my jacket on the back of my chair to go dance with Sarah. My phone was in the inside pocket. The photo showed Liam standing by my empty chair. He wasn't dancing. He wasn't celebrating. He was holding my phone. He had unlocked it. I realized with a jolt that he must have watched me type my passcode a dozen times over the last few months. But he wasn't checking messages. He was holding his own phone above mine, taking a picture of the screen. Leo zoomed in on my phone screen in the photo. It was open to my banking app. The balance was clearly visible. $20 million. Liquid assets. The puzzle pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a freight train. This was not a love story. This was not even a simple case of a gold digger marrying a rich girl. This was a coordinated, tactical operation. Liam and Patricia were partners. They were professionals. They had targeted us. They knew about the money. They had somehow found out about the fortune I kept hidden. They had infiltrated my family. Liam had seduced my daughter to get legal access to her. And Patricia, the fake mother, was the enforcer. They weren't just going to steal from us. They were poisoning Sarah. I thought about the last few weeks. Sarah had been complaining of headaches, nausea, fatigue. She said she felt foggy all the time. Liam had been the doting husband, taking her to doctors who couldn't find anything wrong, bringing her special herbal teas in bed. He was killing her, slowly, systematically. And once she was gone or incapacitated, he would inherit everything. And through him, they would get to my money. I stood up. The shock that had paralyzed me moments ago was gone. In its place was a cold, hard rage that I hadn't felt since my days in the sandbox. The trembling in my hands stopped. My posture straightened. The old man in the cardigan vanished. The Marine returned. "Mr. Bennett," Leo asked, looking terrified, "should we call the police?" I looked at the photos one last time. The kiss, the poison, the theft. If we call the police now, Leo, they will claim the powder was just a supplement, or sugar. They will claim the kiss was a misunderstanding or a bad angle. They will claim Liam was just moving my phone. They will destroy the evidence. They will manipulate Sarah. She loves him. She won't believe this based on grainy photos alone. She is under his spell, and probably under the influence of whatever drugs they are feeding her. "Then what do we do?" Leo asked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a checkbook. I wrote Leo a check for $50,000. "You did good, Leo. You saved our lives. I want you to give me copies of all these files on a secure drive. Then I want you to delete them from your system. Never speak of this to anyone, not your wife, not your priest. If anyone asks, you are still editing the wedding album." Leo took the check, his eyes wide. "I understand, sir, but Sarah, is she safe tonight?" "She is staying at their house tonight," I said, checking my watch. It was nearly midnight. If I go there now, kicking down doors, I lose the element of surprise. They will play the victims. They are playing the long game, Leo. They are poisoning her slowly to mimic a natural illness. She is safe for tonight, but tomorrow the war starts. I took the hard drive Leo handed me. I walked out of the studio into the pouring rain. The storm was still raging, but I didn't feel the cold. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel. I looked at the dark city skyline, buildings that I had designed, structures of steel and glass that had withstood hurricanes and earthquakes. I knew how to build things that lasted. But I also knew how to demolish things that were rotten. Liam and Patricia thought they were predators. They thought they had found a weak old man and a naive girl. They thought they were the hunters. They had no idea that they had just walked into the den of a monster. I started the engine. The roar of the motor sounded like a growl. I drove home, but I didn't go to sleep. I went straight to my basement. I pushed aside a heavy bookshelf to reveal a wall safe that hadn't been opened in 10 years. I spun the dial. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside were the blueprints of my past. Not architectural blueprints, but the other kind. Files on people I used to know. Favors I was owed. And at the back, a small black book containing the number of a lawyer named Sullivan. Sullivan wasn't the kind of lawyer who drafted wills. He was the kind of lawyer you called when you needed to bury someone legally, financially, and permanently. I picked up the phone. It was 3 a.m. Sullivan answered on the second ring. "Bennett," Sullivan rasped. "It has been a long time. Is everything okay?" "No, Sullivan," I said, staring at the photo of my wife on my desk. Catherine, who would have torn the world apart to protect our daughter. "I have a job for you. I need you to draft a new will. And I need you to find a private toxicology lab that can run a test on a sample I am going to acquire tomorrow." There was a pause on the line. "What kind of sample, Howard?" "A sample of my son-in-law's sugar," I said. "And Sullivan, clear your schedule. I am going to invite the family over for dinner. I am going to tell them I am dying." "You are dying?" Sullivan asked. "No," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "But they need to believe I am. I need them greedy. I need them careless. I am going to dangle $20 million in front of their faces and watch them snap." I hung up the phone. I sat in the darkness, planning my next move. The photos Leo gave me were the spark, but I needed a fire. I needed to catch them in the act. I needed Sarah to see the devil behind the mask with her own eyes. Tomorrow, I would play the role of the frail, sick old man. I would cough. I would stumble. I would make them think the end was near. I would invite them into my home, and I would serve them their own destruction on a silver platter. They wanted my money. They wanted my daughter's life. They were going to wish they had never met Howard Bennett. I closed the safe. The click of the lock sounded like the cocking of a gun. The game had begun. I pulled my sedan up to the curb in front of the house I had bought for them as a wedding gift. It was a beautiful two-story colonial in the suburbs with a manicured lawn and a white picket fence. It was the picture of the American dream, the exact kind of safe, happy life I had worked 40 years to provide for my daughter. But as I killed the engine and stared at the dark windows, it didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a mausoleum. I gripped the steering wheel, my leather gloves creaking under the pressure. The image of that white powder falling into Sarah's champagne glass was burned into my retinas. Every instinct I had honed in the Marines was screaming at me to kick down the front door, drag Liam out by his perfect hair, and beat the truth out of him on the driveway. I wanted to break him. I wanted to make him feel the fear he was inflicting on my child. But I forced my hands to relax. I took a breath that rattled in my chest. If I went in there as the soldier, I would lose. Liam would play the victim. He would call the police. He would paint me as the unhinged, violent father-in-law, and he would use that to isolate Sarah even further. To save her, I had to be smarter. I had to be the architect, not the demolition expert. I had to find the structural weakness and bring the whole thing down on their heads when they least expected it. I grabbed my cane from the passenger seat. It was a heavy piece of polished hickory with a solid brass head. I didn't really need it to walk, not most days, but it helped sell the image of the frail old man. Tonight, it felt less like a walking aid and more like a weapon waiting to be used. I walked up the path and let myself in with the spare key Sarah had given me. The house was quiet, too quiet. The air smelled stale, like old flowers and sickness. "Sarah," I called out, keeping my voice steady and warm. "Liam, it is Dad." There was a shuffle of movement from the living room. Liam appeared in the hallway, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He was wearing a cashmere sweater and designer jeans, looking every inch the concerned, loving husband. But I saw the flash of annoyance in his eyes before he plastered on that charming smile. "Howard," he said, his voice hushed. "We weren't expecting you. Sarah is resting. She has had a rough day." I pushed past him, my cane thumping rhythmically on the hardwood floor. "I need to see her, Liam. I haven't heard from her in 2 days." I walked into the living room, and my heart stopped. Sarah was lying on the beige sofa, wrapped in a thick wool blanket despite the thermostat being set to 75 degrees. She looked like a ghost of the girl who had danced with me at her wedding just 4 weeks ago. Her skin, usually rosy and full of life, was a translucent shade of gray. Her cheekbones jutted out sharply, and there were dark, bruised circles under her eyes. She looked 20 years older. "Dad," she rasped. Her voice was thin and trembling. I sat on the edge of the coffee table, reaching out to take her hand. It was ice cold and clammy. "Hi, honey," I said, fighting to keep the tremor out of my voice. "I was just in the neighborhood. How are you feeling?" "So tired, Dad," she whispered. She tried to sit up, but the effort seemed to exhaust her. She fell back against the cushions, closing her eyes. "My head hurts so much, and my stomach. I just can't keep anything down." As I stroked her hair, a loose clump of blonde strands came away in my hand. I stared at it, horrified. Arsenic. It had to be. Hair loss was a classic symptom of heavy metal poisoning. They weren't just making her sick, they were killing her cells from the inside out. Liam walked into the room, carrying a steaming mug on a tray. "Here we go, darling," he cooed, sitting on the edge of the sofa and blocking my view of her. "I made you your special tea. You need to take your medicine." He held the mug to her lips with a tenderness that made my skin crawl. It was a performance, a macabre piece of theater designed to hide a murder. "What is that?" I asked, pointing at the mug with the tip of my cane. "Just a herbal blend my mother sent over," Liam said smoothly, not even looking at me. "And some supplements the doctor recommended. It helps with the nausea." "Which doctor?" I asked. "Dr. Evans," Liam replied. "He says it is just severe adrenal fatigue, post-wedding crash. Her body is just shutting down from all the stress of the planning. She just needs rest and nutrition." Lies. All lies. I watched Sarah sip the liquid. She winced at the taste, but swallowed it down because she trusted him. She trusted the man who vowed to protect her. It took every ounce of discipline I possessed not to swing my cane and shatter that mug against the wall. I watched the liquid go down her throat, knowing it was poison. Knowing I was letting it happen in this very second. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. But I knew if I stopped him now, without proof, without the toxicology report, he would just switch methods. He would use a pillow next time, or a flight of stairs. I had to let him think he was winning. "You are a good man, Liam," I said, forcing a smile that felt like a rictus of pain. "Taking such good care of her. Most men would be at the golf course on a Saturday." Liam preened under the compliment. His ego was his weakness. He loved being the hero. "I would do anything for her, Howard," he said, stroking Sarah's cheek. "She is my life." I looked around the room, my architect's eye scanning for details. I noticed a small ceramic jar sitting on the side table, separate from the rest of the tea service. It had a distinct blue pattern. Liam had dipped the spoon into that jar, not the sugar bowl on the tray. "I need to use the restroom," I said, standing up and feigning a groan as I straightened my back. Old age is not for the faint of heart, kids. "Take your time, Howard," Liam said, turning his attention back to Sarah. "Drink it all, baby. Every drop." I walked into the hallway, but I didn't go to the bathroom. I waited in the shadows, watching them through the crack in the door. I watched Liam finish feeding her. I watched him wipe her mouth. And then, I watched him pick up the blue jar and carry it into the kitchen. He was confident. He was arrogant. He thought I was just a senile old checkbook. He didn't know he had let the enemy inside the perimeter. I needed that jar, or at least I needed a sample of what was inside it. And I needed to get Sarah out of this house, even for a few hours, to get a clean blood sample without him hovering. I walked back into the living room, my plan forming in my mind. "Liam," I said, looking at my watch. "I actually came by for a reason. I need a favor." "Anything, Howard," he said, standing up. "I am meeting with my estate planner next week," I lied. "I am thinking of restructuring my assets, merging the accounts. It is too much work for me to manage alone anymore. I was thinking, maybe you could come by for dinner tomorrow night. Bring Sarah if she is up to it. I want to discuss giving you power of attorney over the family trust." Liam's eyes widened. The greed was instantaneous. It flared in his pupils like a match in a dark room. $20 million. Power of attorney. It was the golden ticket he had been killing for. "Power of attorney," he repeated, trying to sound casual. "Are you sure, Howard? That is a big responsibility." "I am tired, Liam," I said, letting my shoulders slump. "I trust you. You are family now. And seeing how you care for Sarah, well, it proves I made the right choice." I could see the wheels turning in his head. If he got power of attorney, he wouldn't need to kill Sarah immediately. He could slow down the poisoning. He could play the long game. This would buy her time. And it would get them into my house, on my territory. "We would be honored, Howard," Liam said, grinning. "We will be there." "Good," I said. I looked at Sarah one last time. Her eyes were drifting shut, the drug taking effect. "I love you, sweetheart." "Love you, Dad," she mumbled. I walked to the door, my hand trembling as I gripped the knob. I had bought her another day. But as I looked back at Liam, who was already texting someone on his phone, probably Patricia, I knew the clock was ticking. I stepped out into the cool afternoon air, the door clicking shut behind me. I didn't get into my car immediately. I walked around the side of the house to the kitchen window. I peered inside. Liam was on the phone. He was laughing. He reached into the cupboard and pulled out the blue ceramic jar. He poured a generous amount of the white powder into his own coffee. Wait. I squinted. He was drinking it. If he was drinking it, it wasn't poison. Then I saw it. He opened a different cabinet, a high one above the refrigerator. He pulled out a small, unmarked plastic tub. He took a tiny pinch from that tub and sprinkled it into the blue jar. He was mixing it, cutting it, hiding the poison in his own private sugar stash, but only adding the toxic element when he needed to. He put the tub back. I had him. I knew where the weapon was. Now, I just needed to steal it. And I knew exactly how to do it. I walked back to my car, a cold resolve settling over me. They wanted to play games with my daughter's life. Fine. But they had forgotten the first rule of war. Never underestimate the enemy. I started the car. I wasn't going home. I was going to the hardware store. I needed a ladder, a glass cutter, and a pair of tactical gloves. Tonight, the old architect was going to become a burglar. The following evening, I walked back into the belly of the beast. I was wearing my best suit, the charcoal one I usually reserved for board meetings or funerals. But I had accessorized it with my cane and a slight manufactured limp. The stage was set. I had called Sullivan, my lawyer, and told him to have the papers ready, but blank. I needed bait. When Liam opened the door, the smell of roast chicken wafted out, a domestic perfume designed to mask the stench of treachery. Patricia was there, of course. She was arranging flowers in the hallway, posing as the doting mother-in-law, but her eyes snapped to me with the cold calculation of a bank teller counting fresh bills. "Howard," she cooed, coming forward to kiss my cheek. Her lips were dry and felt like paper. "We are so glad you could make it. Sarah is in the dining room." I walked in. Sarah was sitting at the head of the table, propped up by pillows in her wheelchair. She looked worse than yesterday. Her skin was the color of old parchment, and her head lolled slightly to the side. They had dressed her up like a doll, put lipstick on her pale lips, but she wasn't really there. The drugs had pulled her under. I sat to her right. Liam sat across from me. Patricia took the foot of the table. We were a family of vultures circling a dying dove. Dinner was a blur of polite conversation and lies. Liam talked about market trends. Patricia talked about the weather. I talked about my failing health, inventing a heart condition that made my hands shake. I watched them exchange glances. They were eating it up. Every tremor of my hand was a dollar sign in their eyes. Then came the tea. It was the moment I had been waiting for. Liam went to the sideboard. I watched him like a hawk. He poured 4 cups. He put sugar in 3 of them from the silver bowl. But for Sarah's cup, and his own, he reached for that specific blue ceramic jar I had seen through the window. He spooned the white powder in. He placed the cup in front of Sarah. Then he placed the blue jar near his own elbow, far out of my reach. "Drink up, darling," Liam said to Sarah. "It will help you sleep." Sarah reached for the cup with a trembling hand. I knew I had seconds. I needed that jar. Or at least, I needed what was inside it. And I needed to stop Sarah from drinking that specific dose. I reached for my own cup. I let my hand hover over the saucer. I channeled every ounce of focus I had, initiating a violent, spasmodic tremor in my right arm. "Oh, damn it," I muttered. I flailed. My hand struck my teacup, sending it flying across the table. Hot liquid splashed over the tablecloth. The cup shattered against the gravy boat, but I didn't stop there. I allowed the momentum of my spasm to carry my arm further, knocking over the water pitcher, creating a cascading river of ice water that surged across the table directly towards Liam. Liam jumped up, cursing as the water hit his expensive trousers. Patricia shrieked, grabbing napkins. "Oh, Howard, the rug!" "I am so sorry," I stammered, playing the part of the humiliated invalid. "My hands, I just can't control them anymore." Chaos. Beautiful, orchestrated chaos. Liam was busy dabbing at his crotch. Patricia was on her knees, frantically trying to save the Persian rug. Sarah was staring blankly at the mess, too sedated to react. This was it. I pulled a handkerchief from my pocket. I pretended to help wipe the table. I leaned across, my chest heaving with fake exertion. "Let me help! Let me help!" I wheezed. I reached out with the handkerchief, but I didn't aim for the water. In one fluid motion, honed by years of sleight-of-hand card tricks in the barracks, I swiped the handkerchief inside the open rim of the blue ceramic jar. I scooped a generous mound of the white powder into the folds of the cloth. In the same motion, I knocked Sarah's poisoned cup onto the floor. It smashed, the liquid pooling into the carpet. "Oh no, Sarah's tea!" I cried out. "I am so clumsy." I balled the handkerchief up tight, trapping the powder inside, and shoved it deep into my jacket pocket. I looked up. Liam was standing frozen. He wasn't wiping his pants anymore. He wasn't looking at the rug. He was looking at me. His eyes were narrowed. His jaw was set tight. The charm was gone. The mask had slipped, just for a fraction of a second. He was looking at me not as a clumsy old man, but as a threat. He had seen the speed of my hand. He had seen that the swipe was too clean, too precise for a man with tremors. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a sudden, violent electricity. The silence stretched, taut as a piano wire. "You are very eager to help, Howard," Liam said softly. His voice was low, devoid of the warmth he usually faked. I held his gaze. I didn't blink. I let him see a flash of the steel beneath the gray hair. I needed him to be unsure. I needed him paranoid. "I just want to be useful, Liam," I said, my voice steady now. "It is hard, knowing you are losing control, knowing someone else has to take over." I let the double meaning hang there. I was talking about my health, but I was also talking about him. Patricia stood up, breaking the tension. She looked flustered, her hair out of place. "It is fine, Howard. It is just a rug. Liam, get the maid to clean this up. Howard, why don't you go into the study? We can discuss the paperwork there." Liam didn't move for a second. He kept staring at me, searching my face for a sign of deception. He looked at my pocket where the sample was hidden. I could see the gears turning. He was wondering if I had taken something. He was wondering if I knew. But greed is a powerful blinder. He wanted that power of attorney. He wanted the $20 million. If he accused me now, if he searched me, he risked blowing the deal. He risked alienating the golden goose right before the slaughter. He forced a smile back onto his face. It looked painful, like a liet in porcelain. "Of course," Liam said. "Go to the study, Howard. I will make Sarah a fresh cup, a stronger one." The threat was clear. He was going to up the dosage. He was going to punish her for my clumsiness. I stood up, gripping my cane. I had the sample. I had the weapon. But leaving Sarah in that chair, knowing he was going back to the kitchen to brew more poison, felt like leaving a soldier behind on the battlefield. I walked past him. I stopped close enough to smell his cologne, a scent that couldn't quite mask the chemical tang of the house. "Don't make it too strong, Liam," I said, patting his shoulder with my heavy hand. "We need her awake to sign the papers, don't we?" I felt his muscles tense under my grip. "She will be awake enough," he said. I walked into the study. I could feel his eyes boring into my back, two burning points of suspicion. He knew something was wrong. The game had shifted. We weren't playing family anymore. We were playing cat and mouse, and for the first time, the mouse had shown its teeth. I sat in the heavy leather chair in the study, my hand resting protectively over the pocket containing the powder. I could hear them whispering in the hallway. "Did you see that?" Liam hissed. "He is just old, Liam," Patricia snapped. "Focus. The papers. Get the papers." I checked my watch. Sullivan was waiting at the lab. I just needed to get through the next hour. I needed to dangle the fortune, get out of this house alive, and get this powder to the spectrometer. But as I looked at the door, I realized the lock was on the outside. And for the first time that night, I wondered if they were going to let me leave at all. The door handle turned, the metallic click echoing like a gunshot in the silent study. I didn't flinch. I kept my hand over my pocket, guarding the handkerchief as if it contained a nuclear code. Liam and Patricia walked in, their faces tight with a mixture of anxiety and greed. Patricia was holding a manila folder. Liam was holding a pen. They looked like vultures realizing the carcass was still breathing, impatient to start the feast, but bound by the necessity of legalities. "Here are the preliminary papers, Howard," Patricia said, sliding the folder across the mahogany desk. "It is just the letter." They escorted me to the door like I was a fragile piece of antique furniture they were afraid to break before the auction. I walked to my car, leaning heavily on my cane, playing the part until the very second I turned the corner at the end of the street. As soon as the house was out of sight, the cane went into the passenger seat. I gripped the wheel with both hands, my knuckles white. I drove fast, weaving through the late-night traffic, heading not for my home, but for a nondescript brick building in the industrial sector. It was the private laboratory of Dr. Harris, an old friend from the service who had traded battlefield triage for forensic toxicology. He was the only man I trusted to run this test off the books. I had called him on the way over. He was waiting at the back door. "Howard," Harris said, ushering me into the sterile, fluorescent-lit room. "You look like you have seen a ghost." I handed him the balled-up handkerchief. "Worse, Harris. I think I am seeing a murder in slow motion. Test this. Now." Harris didn't ask questions. He took the sample to his workbench. I watched him tap the white powder into a glass vial, adding reagents, placing it into the spectrometer. The machine hummed, a low mechanical drone that grated against my frayed nerves. I paced the room, the smell of isopropyl alcohol stinging my nose. Every second that ticked by was a second the poison was coursing through Sarah's veins. I thought about her pale face, the hair coming out in my hand. I thought about the way she looked at Liam, with that desperate, drugged adoration. The machine beeped. A printer whirred to life. Harris ripped the paper off and studied it. His face went gray. He looked up at me over his glasses, and I saw a horror there that matched my own. "Howard," he said quietly, "this is arsenic trioxide, high grade, and it is cut with a heavy dose of benzodiazepines." I closed my eyes. Hearing it confirmed was like taking a bullet. It wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a fact. "How bad is it?" I asked. "It is a lethal cocktail," Harris said, pointing to the graph. "The sedative keeps the victim pliable, confused, compliant. It mimics the symptoms of exhaustion or depression. But the arsenic, it accumulates. It attacks the nervous system, the kidneys, the heart. Given the concentration in this sugar sample, whoever is ingesting this is being poisoned systematically. This isn't accidental, Howard. This is an execution." "How long?" I asked. My voice was a stranger to me. "If they keep dosing her at this rate, a week, maybe 2. Her organs will start to shut down. It will look like heart failure or a sudden stroke." I took the report from his hand. The paper felt heavy, like lead. "Thank you, Harris," I said. "Destroy the sample. Wipe the data." "Howard," Harris grabbed my arm. "You have to call the police. This is attempted murder. You have the proof." I pulled away gently. I looked at the report. Arsenic and sedatives. A piece of paper with a chemical breakdown. If I go to the cops now, Aris, they will arrest him. They will drag him out in handcuffs. And Sarah? She is drugged. She is brainwashed. She will scream. She will fight them. She will testify that I am a crazy, jealous old man who framed her husband. Liam will have a lawyer within the hour. He will say I planted it. He will say I am the one trying to control her. He is a con man, Aris. He is good at this. He will create doubt. And while the courts argue, Sarah will hate me. She will never believe he tried to kill her. She needs to see it. See what? Aris asked. She needs to see the wolf take off the sheepskin, I said. She needs to see him pour the poison with her own eyes. I walked out of the lab into the cool night air. I sat in my car and dialed Sullivan. It was nearly midnight, but I knew he would be awake. It is confirmed, Sullivan, I said. Arsenic. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Those sons of bitches. We are going to the DA? No, I said. We are sticking to the plan. But we are accelerating the timeline. I cannot wait a week. I cannot wait 3 days. Sarah is dying, Sullivan. Every cup of tea is a step towards the grave. What do you want to do? Sullivan asked. I want you to draft the new will, I said. Make it look real. Make it look ironclad. I want to transfer everything, the accounts, the properties, the portfolio. I want a document that hands over $20 million to Liam and Sarah, effective immediately upon my signature. You are going to give it to them? Sullivan asked, shocked. I am going to put it on the table, I said. I am going to dangle the meat in front of the tiger. I am going to make them so hungry, so excited, that they forget to be careful. I am going to invite them to dinner tomorrow night. The anniversary party. I am going to turn it into a celebration of my generosity. And then? And then, I said, staring at the lights of the city. I am going to close the trap. I need you to get the tech guys ready. I need the audio from the house. I need the video from the wedding photographer. I need everything queued up. When I give the signal, I want their lives to play out on the big screen. I want Sarah to see the affair. I want her to hear them planning her death. It is risky, Howard, Sullivan warned. If they suspect anything, they won't, I said, because they think I am a dying, senile old fool who just wet himself at their dinner table. They think they have won. I hung up the phone. I started the engine. I wasn't going home to sleep. I was going home to prepare for war. Tomorrow night, my dining room would become a courtroom, and I would be judge, jury, and executioner. But first, I had to make sure my daughter survived the night. I drove past their house one more time, parking down the street, watching the dark windows, a sentinel in the night, waiting for the sun to rise on the day of reckoning. The next evening, my dining room was set for a funeral feast, though my guests thought it was a celebration of a windfall. I had instructed the staff to lay out the fine china, the heavy silverware, and the crystal glasses. I wanted the room to smell of old money. I wanted the chandeliers to sparkle so brightly that they blinded Liam and Patricia to the trap door opening beneath their feet. I stood before the mirror in the hallway, adjusting my tie with hands that were steady as rock, though in a few minutes they would be trembling with a manufactured palsy. I had prepared the prop carefully. A small gelatin capsule filled with a mixture of corn syrup, red food coloring, and a drop of peppermint oil to mask the sugar smell. I tucked it into my cheek, lodging it between my gum and my molars. It was an old stage trick, but under the dim mood lighting of the dining room, it would look like a death sentence. The doorbell rang. It sounded like a knell. I grabbed my cane, hunched my shoulders, and shuffled to the door. When I opened it, the sight of my daughter nearly broke my resolve. Sarah was in a wheelchair now. Liam was pushing her. Her head was lolling against the headrest, her eyes half open but seeing nothing. She looked like a broken doll. "Oh, Howard," Patricia gushed, stepping past the wheelchair to embrace me. Her perfume was overpowering, a floral stench that reminded me of funeral homes. "You look tired." "I am holding on, Patricia," I wheezed, leaning heavily on the doorframe. "Just holding on. Come in, please." Liam wheeled Sarah into the foyer. He looked around my house with a hunger he didn't even try to hide. I saw his eyes cataloging the paintings on the walls, the antique vase on the console table, the Persian runners. He wasn't looking at a home. He was looking at an inventory list. "We brought her, just like you asked," Liam said, his voice smooth and solicitous. "But she is very weak, Howard. I don't know how long she can stay awake." "Just for dinner," I said. "I need her to hear this. It is important." We moved to the dining room. I sat at the head of the table. Liam and Patricia sat on either side of me, flanking me like guards. Sarah was positioned at the end, silent and pale. I had instructed the servers to pour the wine immediately. A vintage Cabernet, deep red and expensive. Liam drank his greedily. Patricia sipped hers, her eyes darting around the room, calculating. I cleared my throat. It was a wet, rattling sound that made Patricia flinch. "I have something to tell you," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. "I haven't been honest with you." Liam leaned forward, his wine glass paused halfway to his mouth. "What is it, Howard?" I looked at Sarah, then at them. "I wanted to protect you," I said, "but I can't anymore." "The doctors. They gave me the news yesterday." "News?" Patricia asked, her eyes narrowing. "It is cancer," I lied. "Pancreatic. Stage 4. It has spread to the liver. They say I have 3 months, maybe less." The silence that followed was absolute. I watched their faces. I watched for shock. I watched for grief. I saw none of it. Instead, I saw a spark. It started in Liam's eyes, a tiny flare of excitement that he quickly tried to mask with a frown. Then I saw it in Patricia. Her lips parted slightly, a small intake of breath, not of horror, but of anticipation. They were doing the math. 3 months, 90 days. That was the timeline. "Oh, Howard," Patricia said, reaching out to cover my hand with hers. Her skin was dry and cold. "That is terrible. Are you sure? Is there no treatment?" I shook my head. "It is too late. I refused the chemo. I want to die with dignity." Liam set his wineglass down. He looked solemn, but I could see the pulse jumping in his neck. He was excited. He was practically vibrating with it. "I am so sorry, Howard," he said. "We will take care of you. You know that. We will be here until the end." "I know," I said. "And that is why I asked you here. I need to settle my affairs. I have considerable assets." "How considerable?" Patricia asked. The question slipped out too fast, too sharp. She tried to soften it with a sad smile. "I mean, we just want to make sure everything is handled properly for Sarah." $20 million, I said, in liquid assets, plus the real estate portfolio. The number hung in the air. I saw Liam's pupils dilate. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. 20 million. It was more than they had expected. It was enough to kill for. It was enough to make them careless. But there is a problem, I continued, letting my voice tremble. The accounts are offshore. They are complicated. If I die without transferring them, the government will take half. It could be tied up in probate for years.
Sarah wouldn't see a dime for a decade.
Probate, Liam repeated. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. He didn't want to wait 10 years. He didn't even want to wait 3 months. I need to transfer it now, I said, while I am still lucid, while I can still sign the papers. I want to move it all into a joint trust, for Sarah, and for you, Liam, since you are her husband. Since you are the one taking care of us. Liam looked at Patricia. They exchanged a glance that screamed victory. They thought they had manipulated me perfectly. They thought the old man was handing over the keys to the kingdom just before he kicked the bucket. That sounds wise, Howard, Liam said, trying to keep his voice steady. We can help you with that. We can set it up immediately. I nodded. But then, I bit down on the capsule in my cheek. The bitter taste of corn syrup and mint flooded my mouth. I let out a cough, a dry, hacking sound, then another. I bent double over the table, my body convulsing in a performance I had rehearsed in the mirror for an hour. "Howard!" Patricia cried out, half rising from her chair. I gagged. I let the red liquid pool in my mouth. And then, with a violent retch, I expelled it into the pristine white napkin I held to my lips. I pulled the napkin away. A bright, shocking stain of red blood bloomed on the white cloth. I let it drip onto the table, splashing next to my wine glass. I groaned, wiping my mouth, smearing the red dye across my chin. "Oh my God," Liam said, recoiling. I slumped back in my chair, breathing heavily, letting the napkin drop to the floor so they could see the blood clearly. "It is getting worse," I gasped. "The doctor said the bleeding would start soon." Patricia stared at the blood. She didn't look disgusted. She looked mesmerized. To her, that blood wasn't a sign of tragedy. It was a timer. It was confirmation. The old man really was dying. The obstacle was removing itself. "We need to do this fast," I wheezed, grabbing Liam's arm with a desperate claw-like grip. "I might not have 3 months. I might not have 3 weeks. I feel it. I feel it eating me." Liam looked at the blood on my chin, then at my eyes. He nodded, his face serious, but his eyes were shining with a predatory light. "Tomorrow," he said. "We will do it tomorrow. I will call the lawyers. We will get everything signed." "Yes," I whispered. "Tomorrow. Bring the papers. Bring Sarah. We will finish it." I leaned back, closing my eyes, feigning exhaustion. But beneath my eyelids, I was watching them. I saw Liam pour himself another glass of wine, his hand shaking with adrenaline. I saw Patricia smile at him, a cold, triumphant curve of her lips. They believed it. They believed I was a dying man desperate to give them my fortune. They didn't know that the blood was syrup. They didn't know that the cancer was a lie. And they certainly didn't know that while they were dreaming of yachts and private jets, I was dreaming of the moment the steel trap would snap shut around their necks. "I need to lie down," I murmured. "Please, show yourselves out." Liam stood up. He walked over to Sarah's wheelchair. He looked at her, then at me. "Rest easy, Howard," he said. "We will take care of everything." He wheeled Sarah out. Patricia followed, pausing only to pat my shoulder. "Get some sleep, Howard," she said. "You have a big day tomorrow." I listened to the front door close. I listened to their car start up and drive away. I sat up in the empty dining room. I wiped the fake blood from my chin with the back of my hand. I stood up, tossing the stained napkin onto the table. My tremor vanished. My posture straightened. I walked to the window and watched their taillights disappear into the night. "Enjoy your victory lap, Liam," I whispered to the darkness. "Because tomorrow night, you are going to choke on it." I picked up my phone and dialed Sullivan. "They took the bait," I said. "We are on for tomorrow. Make sure the cameras are rolling. Make sure the police are on standby." I looked at the empty chair where Sarah had sat, slumped and silent. "Hold on, baby girl," I said to the empty room. "Just one more day. Daddy is coming." The silence that filled the dining room after I dropped the $20 million figure was heavy, thick with a greed so potent I could almost taste it on my tongue like copper. It hung in the air, displacing the oxygen, making the candle flames seem to flicker and bow. I watched them. I watched the way Liam's eyes darted from me to Patricia, a silent, frantic telegraph of disbelief and avarice. They had thought they were killing a well-off retiree for a nice suburban house and a modest life insurance policy. They had just discovered they were sitting across from a gold mine. I leaned back in my chair, letting a wheeze rattle wetly in my chest, playing the part of the dying patriarch to perfection. I took a sip of water, my hand trembling just enough to make the ice cubes clink against the crystal. I needed to let the numbers sink in. 20 million. It was a number that changed people. It was a number that made cautious criminals reckless. It was a number that turned predators into gluttons who would choke on their own appetites. "But there is a problem," I rasped, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "A big problem." Patricia leaned in, her eyes sharp and hungry. "What kind of problem, Howard?" "The government," I spat the word out with disdain. "The vultures. You know how it is. These accounts, they are complex. They are offshore, Cayman Islands, Switzerland. Structures I built 30 years ago to protect my privacy. If I die with these assets in my name, without a clear, executed succession plan, they will freeze everything." I saw the color drain from Liam's face. The fear of loss was already taking root, even before he had the money in his hand. "Freeze it?" Liam asked, his voice tight. "For how long?" "Years," I lied. "Probate could take 5, maybe 10 years. The IRS will tear it apart. The estate taxes alone will take 50%, maybe more. Sarah won't see a dime until she is 40, and by then, the lawyers will have eaten the rest." I let that hang there. I watched the panic flare in Patricia's eyes. The idea of losing half the money to the government hurt her more than the idea of killing me. To a grifter, a lost opportunity is a physical wound. "We can't let that happen, Howard," Patricia said, her voice sharp with urgency. "We have to protect Sarah's future." I nodded, wiping a bead of sweat from my forehead. "I know. That is why I called you here. I have a plan, but we have to move fast. My time, I can feel it running out." "What is the plan?" Liam asked. He was leaning so far over the table, he was almost in the gravy boat. "I want to move it all," I said. "Tonight, tomorrow, immediately. I want to liquidate the offshore holdings and transfer the entire bulk sum into a domestic trust. A secure, irrevocable family trust. For Sarah. And for you, Liam." Liam's jaw practically unhinged. "For me?" "You are her husband," I said, infusing my voice with a pathetic, desperate trust. You are the man who is going to take care of her when I am gone. I want your name on the account. I want you to have full access, joint ownership, so the government can't touch it. So you can use it to make her comfortable." I paused, turning my gaze to my daughter. Sarah was slumped in her wheelchair, her head lolling to the side, a thin line of drool escaping her lips. The drugs they had fed her were doing their job. She was barely conscious. It broke my heart to use her as a prop in this theater, but I needed them to see her weakness.
I needed them to see her not as a person, but as a liability.
"But look at her," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Look at my baby girl. She is so weak. She doesn't even know where she is." Liam looked at her with a feigned expression of sorrow, but I saw the contempt underneath. "She is fighting hard, Howard. It is the illness." "I know," I said, "and that is the issue. The bank, they need signatures. They need verification. They need someone coherent to manage the transfer, to manage the investments. If we put this in her name alone, if they see her like this, they will declare her incapacitated. They will appoint a court trustee, a stranger, someone who will lock the money away and give you an allowance." I saw the horror on Liam's face. An allowance. That was his nightmare. He didn't want a stipend. He wanted the kingdom. "We can't have that," Liam said quickly. "That would be a disaster." "Exactly," I said. I slammed my hand on the table, weak but decisive.
That is why I made a decision.
I spoke to my lawyer, Sullivan. He is drafting the papers right now. I locked eyes with Liam. I stared deep into the soul of the man who was slowly murdering my child. "I need someone strong to handle this, Liam. I need someone I can trust. I want to give you full power of attorney. Not just over the trust, over her. Over her medical decisions, over her finances, everything." The room went silent. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. This was it. The bait was in the water. I was offering him total control. I was offering him the legal right to do whatever he wanted with Sarah and the money. I was handing him the murder weapon and asking him to sign for it. I saw the calculation behind his eyes. He was thinking about how easy it would be. With power of attorney, he wouldn't even need to hide the poison anymore. He could just stop her treatment. He could commit her to a facility. He could drain the accounts and disappear to a non-extradition country before the ink was dry. He thought he had won the lottery. He thought he had outsmarted the senile old architect. He didn't see the steel trap waiting to snap his neck. I don't know what to say, Howard," Liam stammered, trying to sound humble. "That is a huge responsibility. Are you sure?" I reached out and grabbed his hand. His skin was smooth, uncalloused, the hand of a parasite. "I am sure, Liam. You were the son I never had. I see how you look at her. I see how you care for her. Who else can I trust? Patricia? She is wonderful, but she isn't her husband. You are the head of this family now. I need you to step up. Can you do that for me? Can you save this family's legacy?" Liam squeezed my hand back. He nodded, a solemn, grave expression masking the absolute euphoria exploding in his brain. "I can do that, Howard," he said. "I will take the burden. I won't let you down."
Patricia let out a breath she must have been holding for a minute. She reached over and patted my arm.
"You are making the right choice, Howard. Liam is very capable. He will make sure every penny is used for Sarah's well-being. I bet he will, I thought. Good, I said, pulling my hand away and reaching for my wine glass. Then it is settled. Sullivan is bringing the documents tomorrow night for the anniversary party. I want to do it then. A celebration, a passing of the torch. We will sign the transfer, we will sign the power of attorney, and then I can rest. Tomorrow night, Liam repeated. He was practically vibrating. He was already spending the money in his head. He was already picking out the color of his Ferrari. Yes, I said. Invite everyone. Our friends, your friends. I want witnesses. I want everyone to know that I have chosen you. I want no doubts when I am gone. It was the final touch. The narcissist in him couldn't resist an audience. He wanted the applause. He wanted the world to see him being crowned king. He didn't realize I was inviting witnesses to his execution. I looked at my watch. I am tired, I said, letting my shoulders slump. The excitement, it is too much for my heart. Liam stood up immediately. He was eager to get me out of there. He wanted to celebrate. He wanted to start planning. Of course, Howard, he said. You need your rest. We will get Sarah home. We will see you tomorrow. He wheeled Sarah out of the dining room. I followed them to the door, leaning heavily on my cane. I watched them load her into the car. Liam didn't look at her with love. He looked at her like she was a heavy bag of cash he had to lug around for one more day. Drive safe, I called out from the porch. We will, Dad, Liam called back. He called me Dad. It took everything I had not to go down those stairs and strangle him. I watched their taillights disappear down the long driveway. The darkness of the estate swallowed them up. I stood there for a moment in the cool night air, listening to the crickets, feeling the adrenaline pumping through my veins like ice water. I turned and walked back inside. I didn't go to bed. I went straight to the library. I walked over to the large oil painting of the coastline that hung above the fireplace. I reached behind the frame and pressed a small button. The painting swung outward, revealing a bank of monitors recessed into the wall. I had installed the system years ago, back when I was working on government contracts. High-definition audio and video surveillance of the entire ground floor. But I had recently added a new feed. I tapped a key. A grainy night vision image flickered onto the center screen. It was the interior of Liam and Sarah's living room. I had planted the bugs when I broke in to steal the sugar. A tiny camera in the smoke detector, another in the bookshelf. I waited. 10 minutes later, I saw the front door open on the screen. Liam pushed the wheelchair in. Patricia followed, closing the door and locking it. As soon as the latch clicked, the performance dropped. Liam spun around, grabbing Patricia by the waist and lifting her into the air. He didn't look like a concerned husband. He looked like a man who had just scored the winning touchdown. "Did you hear him?" Liam shouted, his voice tinny through the speakers but clear as day. 20 million! $20 million! Patricia laughed, a harsh, cawing sound. "And offshore, untraceable once we move it." "Oh my God, Liam, we did it. We actually did it." Liam set her down and looked at Sarah, who was still slumped in the chair. He walked over to her. He didn't stroke her hair. He poked her shoulder, hard. "Hey, Sleeping Beauty," he sneered. "Did you hear that? Daddy is giving us the keys to the castle." Sarah moaned softly, shifting but not waking. "What do we do about her?" Patricia asked, walking over to the sidebar and pouring herself a drink. "Do we keep dosing her?" Liam looked at my daughter. He looked at her with such cold, flat indifference that I felt my hand grip the edge of the desk until the wood creaked. "No," Liam said. "Not tonight. We need her lucid enough to sign the papers tomorrow. If she is too out of it, the lawyer might get suspicious. We skip the dose tonight. We let her wake up a little, just enough to hold a pen." "And after?" Patricia asked, taking a sip. Liam smiled. It was the smile of a devil. "After we have the signature? After the money is in the trust? We up the dose. We finish it. We give her a massive heart attack. The old man said it himself. She is weak. No one will question it. We bury her next week. And then we wait for Howard to kick the bucket from his cancer. Or maybe we help him along too." Patricia giggled. "I like that plan. Clean, efficient." They clinked their glasses together. "To the Bennett fortune," Liam toasted. "To us," Patricia replied. I watched them drink. I watched them celebrate their victory. I watched them discuss the murder of my daughter and myself as if they were planning a vacation. I reached out and hit the record button. The hard drive hummed as it captured every word, every gesture, every pixel of their guilt. I sat there in the dark, bathed in the blue glow of the monitors. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It was the calm of the sniper who has adjusted for wind and distance, who has his target in the crosshairs, and is just waiting for the command to fire. They thought they had won. They thought tomorrow was their coronation. They didn't know that tomorrow was their funeral. I picked up the phone and dialed Sullivan. "We have them," I said. "They took the bait. And Sullivan? I have the confession on tape." "Good," Sullivan said. "The police chief is coming to the party. He will be dressed as a waiter." "Perfect," I said. I looked at the screen one last time. Liam was kissing Patricia now, right there in front of my unconscious daughter. "Sleep well, Liam," I whispered, "because you are never going to have a peaceful night again." I sat in the darkness of my library, the glow of the monitors painting my face in spectral shades of blue and gray. The house was silent around me, but in my ears the voices of my enemies were loud and clear, transmitted through the hidden microphones I had planted in the belly of the beast. I watched the screen where Liam and Patricia were celebrating in the living room of the home I had paid for. They had moved past the initial euphoria of the $20 million and settled into a comfortable, terrifying intimacy. Liam was pacing the room, holding a tumbler of scotch. Patricia was lounging on the sofa, her shoes kicked off her legs, draped over the armrest. They didn't look like mother and son. They looked like partners in crime, unwinding after a successful bank heist. "You were brilliant tonight," Liam said, gesturing with his glass. "The way you cried when he coughed up blood. I almost believed you myself." Patricia laughed, a dry, harsh sound that scraped against my nerves. "It wasn't hard, darling. I was crying tears of joy. Did you see his face? He is practically a corpse already. We got lucky, Liam. We got so lucky. If he had lasted another year, we might have had to get our hands dirty with him, too." I gripped the arms of my chair. So they had considered killing me, too. Of course they had. I was just another line item in their ledger. Liam took a long swallow of his drink. "We still might have to," he said casually. "Once the trust is set up, once I have power of attorney over the accounts and Sarah's medical decisions, we control the board. But $20 million is a lot of money to leave sitting in a joint account with a dying man. What if he recovers? What if he goes into remission?" "He won't," Patricia said. "Did you see the blood? It is stage 4. He said it himself. People cling on, Liam mused. I don't want to wait 3 months, Patricia. I want to be in Saint-Tropez by Christmas. I want to be done with this suburban purgatory. I am sick of playing the doting husband. I am sick of the smell of this house. He walked over to the window, looking out at the street where I had parked just hours before. We need to accelerate the timeline, he said. I leaned forward in my chair, my heart hammering a warning rhythm against my ribs. Accelerate. That was the word I feared. What are you thinking? Patricia asked, sitting up. Tomorrow night, Liam said, turning back to her. After the party, after the papers are signed and the lawyer leaves, we have a house full of witnesses seeing Howard hand over the reins. We have a room full of people seeing Sarah weak and sick. It establishes the narrative perfectly. Go on, Patricia said, her eyes gleaming. We give her the final dose tomorrow night, Liam said. A massive bolus, arsenic, and a triple hit of the sedative. It will stop her heart within an hour. We find her in the morning. Tragic. Her body just gave out. The stress of the father's illness combined with her own frailty. No one questions it. We cremate her fast. No autopsy needed, because she has been under a doctor's care for this mysterious fatigue. My blood ran cold. They weren't planning to wait a week. They weren't planning to let her fade away. They were planning to execute her on her 1-month anniversary. The clock I thought I had set had just been smashed. I didn't have days. I had less than 24 hours. And Howard, Patricia asked. Liam shrugged. The shock of his daughter's death. It will be too much for his weak heart. Maybe we slip a little something into his whiskey at the funeral wake, just to help him along. A mercy killing, really. They laughed. They stood there in my daughter's living room, drinking my whiskey and laughing about wiping out my entire bloodline. I watched Sarah on the other monitor. She was in her bedroom now, having been wheeled there by Liam earlier. She was asleep or unconscious, it was hard to tell. She looked so small in that big bed. She had no idea that the man sleeping next to her was planning to stop her heart before the sun set again. I felt a cold rage settle over me, a clarity that only comes in the heat of battle. I had been playing a game of chess, but they had just flipped the board. They wanted a massacre. Fine. I would give them one. But it wouldn't be the one they expected. I reached for the phone. I dialed Sullivan. He picked up on the first ring. "Change of plans," I said, my voice rough with sleeplessness and fury. "What is it, Howard?" Sullivan asked, his voice sharp. "They are moving the timeline up," I said. "They are planning to kill her tomorrow night, immediately after the party." "Jesus," Sullivan breathed. "Are you sure?" "I'm watching them discuss it right now," I said, looking at the screen where Liam was now refilling his glass. "They want the money, and they want us both dead by the weekend. We cannot wait for the ink to dry on those papers, Sullivan. We have to take them down at the party." "It is risky," Howard Sullivan warned. "If we spring the trap too early, if we don't get the confession on record." "I have the confession," I snapped. "I have them on video plotting a double homicide. I have them admitting to the poisoning. It is enough. But I need more than an arrest, Sullivan. I need total destruction. I need Sarah to see this. I need her to understand." "What do you need me to do?" Sullivan asked. "I need you to bring the police chief," I said. "Not just a patrol car. The chief. I know you played golf with him last Sunday. Call in a favor. Tell him I am serving up a high-profile murder conspiracy on a silver platter. I want him in the room when the video plays. I want him to see their faces." "I can do that," Sullivan said. But Howard, if this goes sideways, if Liam realizes what is happening before we are ready, he could hurt her. He will be standing right next to her. I know, I said, looking at the cane leaning against my desk. I pulled open the top drawer and took out the heavy brass handle I had detached earlier. I unscrewed the base, revealing the hollowed-out core where I had added the steel rod for weight. It wasn't just a cane. It was a bludgeon. He won't get the chance, I said. I will be right there. I hung up the phone. On the screen, Liam and Patricia were moving towards the bedroom. I watched with a sick fascination as they walked past Sarah's door without even a glance. They went into the guest room, which they had set up as Patricia's quarters. I saw Liam close the door. I saw them embrace. I turned off the monitor. I had seen enough. I had the evidence. I had the motive. And now, I had the deadline. I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the silence of my empty house. I thought about the $20 million. It was just paper, numbers on a screen. It meant nothing compared to the life of my daughter. I would burn it all in the driveway if it meant saving her. But I didn't have to burn it. I just had to use it as the ultimate weapon. I stood up, my joints popping. I felt every minute of my 70 years, but I also felt a strength I hadn't felt in decades. It was the strength of a father with nothing left to lose. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there in the dark, Liam was sleeping the sleep of the arrogant dreaming of his yachts and his freedom. "Sleep well, Liam," I whispered to the glass. "Because when you wake up, you are going to find out that the old man you tried to bury is the one holding the shovel." I went to my closet and pulled out my old garment bag. I unzipped it and touched the fabric of my dress blues. I wouldn't wear the uniform tomorrow, but I would wear the mindset. Improvise, adapt, overcome. Tomorrow night at 7 p.m., the guests would arrive. At 7:30, the papers would be signed. And at 7:31, I would burn their world to the ground. I lay down on the cot in the library, keeping one eye on the monitors, watching over my daughter from miles away. I didn't sleep. I just waited for the sunrise and the beginning of the end. The driveway of my estate looked like a showroom for luxury automobiles. Bentleys, Mercedes, and Porsches lined the pavement, gleaming under the floodlights. To the casual observer, it was a gathering of the city's elite, a celebration of wealth and legacy. But I knew better. Every car belonged to a member of the sting operation I had orchestrated with Sullivan. The man in the tuxedo sipping sparkling water by the fountain wasn't a hedge fund manager. He was a senior detective with the Major Crimes Unit. The woman admiring the art in the foyer wasn't a gallery owner. She was a forensic accountant, ready to tear apart Liam's financial history. And the servers moving silently through the crowd with trays of hors d'oeuvres weren't catering staff. They were plainclothes officers with handcuffs tucked into their waistbands. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, leaning heavily on my cane, surveying the stage I had built. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm, the calm before the breach. I adjusted my silk tie, checking the hidden earpiece one last time. Sullivan was down there, looking distinctively lawyerly in a sharp navy suit, nodding at me imperceptibly. The trap was primed. The cage was open. We were just waiting for the rats to walk in. At 7:15, the heavy oak doors swung open. A hush fell over the room, partly out of respect for the dying patriarch, and partly because the sight that entered was truly tragic. Liam walked in first, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my first car. He looked like a movie star, radiating a golden, sickening confidence. He smiled at the room, waving as if he were already the lord of the manor, accepting the adulation of his subjects. Behind him came Patricia, draped in emerald silk, diamonds dripping from her neck. She looked triumphant, her eyes scanning the crowd, calculating the net worth of every person in the room. And then, Sarah. My breath caught in my throat. A server was pushing her wheelchair. She was wearing her wedding dress. It was a grotesque touch, Liam's idea, no doubt, to remind everyone of the tragedy of young love cut short by illness. The dress hung loosely on her frame now. Her skin was ashen, her eyes dull and unfocused. She looked like a ghost attending her own funeral. I descended the stairs, exaggerating my limp, playing the part of the frail old man one last time. The crowd parted for me.
My daughter, I rasped, reaching out to touch her cold cheek. You look beautiful.
Sarah looked up at me, her eyes swimming. Dad, she whispered, I am so tired. I know, baby, I said, my voice cracking with genuine grief masked as senility. It is almost over. Just a little longer. Liam stepped up to my side, placing a hand on my shoulder. He squeezed it, a gesture of dominance disguised as support. She is a fighter, Howard, he said loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. She wanted to be here for you, to see this through. He was performing. He was building his alibi. Look at the devoted husband, supporting his sick wife and dying father-in-law. I looked around the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice projecting through the silence. Thank you for coming. You all know why we are here. To celebrate family. To secure the future. I gestured to the table at the front of the room where a stack of legal documents lay waiting. Tonight, I am handing over the reins, I said.
My health? Well, we all know the score. I am transferring the Bennett estate into a trust for my daughter and her husband. I am giving Liam full control. Because I trust him. Because he is the man this family needs. A ripple of polite applause went through the room. I saw Liam chest swell. He was drinking it in. He didn't notice that the applause was thin, that the eyes watching him were cold and calculating. He was too blinded by his own reflection in the gold plating of the evening. Let's get a drink, Liam said, eager to get to the toast, to get to the poison. A toast! To family. He walked to the bar. I watched him. The entire room watched him, though he didn't know it. Every police officer, every lawyer, every witness was tracking his movements. He ordered a scotch for himself, a white wine for Patricia. And for Sarah, he requested a special glass of sparkling cider. I watched his hands. He turned his back to the room for a split second, shielding the glass with his body. It was a smooth motion, practiced and quick. His hand went to his pocket. A quick shake, a stir with a cocktail swizzle. The powder was in the glass. The final dose. The lethal bolus he had promised Patricia. He turned back around, smiling, holding the tray. He walked over to Sarah. Here you go, my love, he said, his voice dripping with synthetic honey. A special drink for a special night. He placed the glass in her trembling hands. I felt a surge of adrenaline so potent it nearly made me drop my cane. This was it. The murder weapon was in her hand. The intent was clear. The crime was in progress. Liam raised his own glass. Patricia raised hers. To Howard, Liam announced, beaming at me. To his generosity, and to the future. Sarah lifted the glass slowly.
Her hand shook, the liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. She looked at me, her eyes confused, trusting. She was about to drink her own death because her husband told her to. The room held its breath. Sullivan tensed.
The police chief, disguised as a sommelier, took a step forward. I looked at Liam. He wasn't looking at me. He was watching Sarah's glass. He was watching the liquid touch her lips. His eyes were wide, dilated with a sick, eager anticipation. He was watching her die. "Stop!" I roared. My voice didn't wheeze, it didn't rattle. It boomed with the authority of a drill sergeant. It shattered the polite atmosphere of the party like a grenade. I dropped my cane. It clattered loudly onto the marble floor. I straightened my back, shedding 20 years of fake frailty in an instant. I stood tall, my shoulders squared, my eyes locking onto Liam like target sights. "Don't drink that, Sarah," I commanded. Sarah froze, the glass inches from her mouth. She looked at me, startled by the change in my voice, by the sudden power radiating from her dying father. Liam looked at me, confusion clouding his face. "Howard? What is—" I stepped forward, moving with a speed and fluidity that made him flinch. I snatched the glass from Sarah's hand. Liam stumbled back, his composure cracking.
"Howard, be careful! You are spilling it!"
I held the glass up to the light. The liquid fizzed innocently. But I knew what was in there. And in about 30 seconds, the whole world would know. "I am not spilling it, Liam," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "I am saving it as evidence."
"Evidence?"
Patricia squawked, her face losing its color.
"What are you talking about?"
"You are confused, Howard. The cancer." "There is no cancer, Patricia," I said, taking another step towards them. They backed away, bumping into the table with the legal documents. "There is no sickness," I continued, my voice rising, filling the cavernous hall. "And there is no trust fund. There is no $20 million waiting for you in the Caymans." Liam's face went slack. "What?" "It was a test," I said, "and you failed." I snapped my fingers. Suddenly, the lights in the room dimmed. A massive projection screen descended from the ceiling behind me. The hum of the projector filled the silence. Liam looked around wildly. He saw the doors were closed. He saw the waiters blocking the exits. He saw the guests staring at him, not with admiration, but with the grim satisfaction of hunters who have cornered the wolf. "What is going on?" Liam screamed, his voice cracking. "Who are these people?" "They are the jury, Liam," I said. "And court is now in session." I pointed the remote at the screen. "Watch closely," I said. "This is your life story." The screen flickered to life. The first image wasn't the romantic montage Liam expected. It was the photo from the wedding, the dark corridor, the hands, the kiss. Gasps erupted from the room. Sarah stared at the screen, her mouth opening in a silent scream of disbelief. She looked from the photo to Liam, then to Patricia. Then the audio started. The recording from last night. Liam's voice, clear and arrogant, booming through the surround sound speakers. "We give her the final dose tomorrow night. A massive bolus. It will stop her heart within an hour." Liam turned white. He looked at the screen, then at me. He looked at the glass in my hand. He realized, with a dawning horror that was almost beautiful to witness, that he hadn't been the one holding the strings. He had been the puppet. "It is a lie!" Patricia shrieked,
lunging towards me. "It is fake! He is crazy!" But before she could reach me, the waiter, who had been standing by the pillar, stepped forward. He didn't offer her an hors d'oeuvre. He pulled a badge from his jacket pocket. "Sit down, Mrs. Vance," the police chief said. "Or should I say, Brenda?" The trap slammed shut. The room exploded into chaos. But in the center of it all, I stood calm, holding the poisoned chalice, watching the fear finally enter Liam's eyes. "Sit down, Mrs. Vance," the police chief said. "Or should I say, Brenda?" The trap slammed shut. The room exploded into chaos. But in the center of it all, I stood, calm, holding the poisoned chalice, watching the fear finally enter Liam's eyes. The name Brenda hit Patricia like a physical blow. She staggered back, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, her hand flying to her throat as if to cover a scar that wasn't there. It was the name she had abandoned 3 states and 5 aliases ago. The name attached to a warrant for grand larceny and fraud in Florida. It was the first loose thread in the sweater, and I was about to pull it until the whole garment unraveled, leaving them naked and shivering in the cold light of truth. "Who are you?" she hissed, her eyes darting from the police chief to me, looking for an exit, looking for a weapon, looking for anything but the accountability that was staring her in the face. "I am the man who dug your grave, Patricia," I said, my voice low and steady. "And now I am going to push you into it." I turned back to the screen. The image of their illicit kiss was still frozen there, looming over the room like a grotesque billboard. But I wasn't done. I hit the button on the remote again. The slide changed. This time it wasn't a photo. It was a video clip. The sound of static filled the room, followed by the unmistakable high-definition audio I had captured from the bugs in their living room. The video was grainy, night vision, black and white, but the figures were unmistakable. Liam was pacing, holding a drink. Patricia was lounging on the sofa. The date stamp in the corner read, "Yesterday, 11:42 p.m. The speakers crackled, and Liam's voice boomed through the ballroom, amplified to a volume that rattled the crystal chandeliers. "We give her the final dose tomorrow night, a massive bolus. It will stop her heart within an hour. We find her in the morning. Tragic. No one questions it." The gasp from the room wasn't just a sound. It was a change in atmospheric pressure. Sarah let out a sound I will never forget. A high keen of pure animal distress, like a wounded creature realizing the trap has bitten bone. She covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide and wet, staring at the man she had promised to love and cherish, staring at the man who was calmly discussing her execution. Liam on the screen took a sip of his drink and laughed, and Howard Patricia on the screen shrugged. The shock of his daughter's death, it will be too much for his weak heart. Maybe we slip a little something into his whiskey at the funeral wake, just to help him along. I paused the video. The image froze on Liam's laughing face, a mask of pure, unadulterated evil. The silence in the room was absolute, terrible and heavy. Liam was shaking now, a violent tremor that started in his hands and seized his entire body. He looked at the screen, then at me, then at the guests. The guests who he thought were admirers. The guests who he now realized were witnesses. "That is AI?" he screamed, his voice cracking, reaching a pitch of hysteria. "That is a deepfake. You made that. You manipulated it. You crazy old man, you are trying to frame us." He lunged for Sarah, grabbing the handles of her wheelchair, trying to use her as a shield, or a hostage. I didn't know which. "Get away from her," he shouted, pulling the chair back. Sarah screamed, flailing her weak arms, trying to push him away. But he didn't get far. Two of the waiters, the ones who had been circulating with champagne trays, dropped their trays with a crash. They moved with the speed of trained tactical officers, stepping in to block his path. Their hands went to their waistbands, revealing the badges clipped to their belts. "Sit down, Mr. Bennett," the detective said, his voice hard as iron. "You are not going anywhere." Liam froze, trapped between the law and the father he had tried to kill. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, desperate, begging me to believe the lie he had lived for 6 months. "Howard, please," he stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "You know me. You know I love." "This is some kind of mistake. Someone is setting me up." I looked at him with a cold detachment. I looked at the sweat on his upper lip, the fear in his eyes, and I felt nothing but disgust. "I know exactly who you are, Liam," I said, walking towards him. I stopped inches from his face, invading his space, forcing him to look at the man he thought was a feeble victim. "I know your real name is Gary. I know you were kicked out of university for embezzlement. I know you met Brenda in a casino in Atlantic City 5 years ago. And I know you have run this scam on 3 other families." I raised the remote again. "One last slide," I said. The screen flickered. The video disappeared, replaced by a high-resolution photograph taken by Leo. It was the shot from the wedding. The shot of Patricia standing behind Sarah, her hand hovering over the champagne flute. The stream of white powder falling into the glass like snow. "And this," I said, holding up the cider glass I had snatched from Sarah's hand, "this is the encore." I turned to the police chief, who was now standing next to Patricia, holding her arm in a grip that would leave bruises. "Chief," I said, handing him the glass. "Carefully. This contains a lethal dose of arsenic and sedatives. I watched him mix it myself. I have the video of that too. But the lab boys can confirm the contents in 20 minutes." Patricia let out a wail, a sound of pure frustration and rage. She tried to pull away, but the chief held firm. "You stupid old fool!" she spat, her face twisting into a mask of hatred. "You were supposed to be dead. You were supposed to be rotting in the ground. And you were supposed to be smart," I retorted. "You got greedy, Brenda. You saw the 20 million and you lost your discipline. You forgot the first rule of the con. Never underestimate the mark." Sarah suddenly found her voice. It was weak, raspy from the poison, but it cut through the room like a knife. "Why?" she whispered, looking at Liam, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "Why, Liam? I loved you. I gave you everything." Liam looked at her, and for a second I thought he might apologize. I thought he might show a flicker of humanity. But the mask was gone completely now, and what was underneath was something reptiles would recognize. "Because it was easy," Liam sneered, his face contorting. "Because you were pathetic, Sarah. You and your daddy playing house in your big mansion. You didn't earn this money. You didn't bleed for it. You just existed. I deserved it more than you ever did." The cruelty of it, the sheer entitlement, was the final nail. "That is enough," I said, my voice low and dangerous. The police chief nodded to his officers. "Take them." The handcuffs came out. The sound of ratcheting steel echoed in the silent room. Liam fought then. He tried to throw a punch, a wild, desperate swing aimed at the detective. The detective didn't even flinch. He sidestepped, grabbed Liam's arm, and slammed him face first into the table, where the legal documents still lay unsigned. The crystal vase of flowers shattered, water and petals spilling over the paperwork, soaking the power of attorney forms that would have signed my daughter's life away. "Get off me!" Liam screamed, thrashing as they hauled him up. "Get off me! I am rich! I have rights!" "You have the right to remain silent," I said, stepping over the broken glass. "You have the right to an attorney, and God knows you are going to need one." Patricia didn't fight. She went limp, putting on a show of fainting, trying to play the fragile woman card one last time. But the female officer who grabbed her didn't buy it. She hauled Patricia up by her armpits, dragging her towards the door, her emerald dress trailing on the floor like a snakeskin. As they dragged them out, past the silent, staring guests, past the forensic accountant who was already on her phone, freezing their assets, past the judge who had signed the warrants, Liam looked back at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a dawning horror. He realized in that moment that he hadn't just lost the money. He hadn't just lost freedom. He had been outplayed. He had been beaten at his own game by the man he had mocked. How he whispered, "How did you know?" I leaned in close so only he could hear. "Because I built this city, son," I said. "I know how to spot a crack in the foundation. And you are nothing but a hairline fracture." They dragged him out. The heavy oak doors slammed shut behind them, sealing the tomb on their ambitions. The room was silent for a heartbeat. Then it erupted into a low murmur of shock and conversation. The guests, the real ones, and the plants were all talking at once, processing the theater they had just witnessed. But I didn't care about them. I turned to Sarah. She was sitting in her wheelchair, trembling violently, her hands clutching the armrests, her face a mask of devastation. The drugs were still in her system, making her sluggish, but the adrenaline of the trauma was fighting through. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and heartbreak. "Dad," she whispered. I dropped my cane, letting it clatter to the floor. I didn't need it anymore. I fell to my knees beside her wheelchair, ignoring the pain in my old joints. I took her hands in mine. They were cold, but they were alive. "I am here, baby," I said, my voice cracking. "I am here. I got them. They can't hurt you anymore." She looked at the screen where the photo of the poisoning was still projected, then back at me. "He was killing me," she said, the realization hitting her in waves. "He was actually killing me." I pulled her into my arms, hugging her fiercely, burying my face in her shoulder. I felt her sob, felt her body shake with the force of her grief. "I am so sorry, Sarah," I whispered. "I am so sorry I let him in. I am so sorry I didn't see it sooner." She clung to me, her fingers digging into my jacket. "You saved me, Dad," she sobbed into my chest. "You saved me." Sullivan walked over, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Howard, the paramedics are here. They need to take her. We need to start the chelation therapy immediately to get the metals out of her system." I nodded, wiping my eyes. I stood up, lifting Sarah effortlessly out of the wheelchair. She was so light, too light from the weeks of sickness. I carried her towards the door, ignoring the wheelchair, ignoring the stairs. "Make way," I commanded the room. The crowd parted. I carried my daughter out of the ballroom, out of the house that had almost been her coffin, and into the cool night air. The ambulance was waiting, lights flashing blue and red against the facade of my home. As they loaded her onto the stretcher, she reached out for my hand. "Don't leave me," she whispered. "Never," I said, climbing into the back of the ambulance beside her. "I am not going anywhere." As the doors closed and the siren wailed, I looked back at the house. The lights were still on. The party was effectively over, but the cleanup was just beginning. I thought about the $20 million. It was still safe, still hidden. But tonight, it felt worthless. The only thing of value was the hand I was holding. The faint pulse beating under my thumb. I looked at Sarah's sleeping face, exhaustion finally claiming her. The nightmare was over. The monsters were in cages. But as the ambulance sped into the night, I knew the hardest part was yet to come. We had survived the war. Now, we had to survive the peace. We had to rebuild from the ashes. And I promised myself right then and there that I would build her a fortress that no wolf could ever breach again. Not with money, but with truth. The room did not just gasp, it recoiled. The sound of the air being sucked out of 100 pairs of lungs at once created a vacuum of pure horror, followed instantly by a shockwave of noise. The video on the screen froze on the image of Liam and Patricia, tangled together in the dark. But the audio kept playing, a loop of their voices plotting murder, echoing off the vaulted ceiling like a demonic chant. Patricia was the first to snap. The carefully constructed mask of the elegant socialite, the doting mother-in-law, the grieving friend. It all shattered in a split second, revealing the cornered animal underneath. She let out a shriek that didn't sound human. It was a guttural tear of vocal cords, a sound of pure primal denial. She didn't run towards the exit. She ran towards the truth, trying to kill it. She scrambled up the steps of the small stage, her heels slipping on the polished wood. Her face contorted into a rictus of madness. She lunged at the projection screen, grabbing the heavy fabric with her manicured claws. "Turn it off!" she screamed, tearing at the material. "Turn it off! You are lying! It is all lies!" She ripped the screen, pulling it down from its frame. The vinyl shrieked as it tore the image of her own betrayal, distorting and crumpling. But the projector was still running, beaming the evidence onto the wall behind her, onto her own thrashing body. The incriminating photos were now projected directly onto her skin, branding her with her own sin. Liam stood frozen by the table, his face draining of blood until he looked like a wax figure melting under the heat of the spotlight. He looked at Patricia thrashing on the stage. Then he looked at me. And then his eyes darted to the glass of sparkling cider I was holding. The evidence. The murder weapon. The smoking gun. He realized in that second that as long as I held that glass, he was a dead man walking. If he could destroy it, if he could claim I spiked it later, if he could just make the liquid disappear, he might have a sliver of a chance. "Give me that!" he shouted, lunging at me with a desperation that gave him a sudden, terrifying speed. He didn't try to hit me. He swiped his arm out in a violent arc, aiming for the glass. His hand connected with my wrist, hard. The impact jarred my arm, and the crystal flute flew from my grip. Time seemed to slow down. I watched the glass turn over in the air, the golden liquid catching the light, spinning, scattering droplets like poison rain. It hit the marble floor right next to Sarah's wheelchair with a sound like a gunshot. Smash! The crystal exploded into 1,000 glittering shards. But it was what happened next that made the entire room freeze. The liquid didn't just pool. The chemical cocktail Dr. Eris had identified, the high concentration of arsenic and sedatives, reacted with the industrial polish of the marble floor. It hissed. It bubbled. A thick white foam erupted from the puddle, spreading rapidly like a living thing, sizzling as it ate into the finish of the stone. The sound was unmistakable, the hiss of a chemical reaction. The smell of bitter almonds and burning chemicals wafted up, pungent and acrid. Liam stared at the white foam, his mouth opening and closing silently. He had destroyed the glass, but in doing so, he had revealed the potency of the weapon. The sight of that bubbling toxic sludge just inches from his wife's feet was more damning than any lab report could ever be. And that was the moment Sarah came back to us. The crash of the glass seemed to snap something in her brain. The adrenaline of the chaos pierced through the fog of the sedatives. Her head jerked up. Her eyes, usually so dull and swimming, widened with a sudden terrifying clarity. She looked at the white foam sizzling on the floor. She looked at the hem of her wedding dress, where a single drop had landed, leaving a small black burn mark on the silk. She realized with a jolt that nearly knocked her out of the chair that the burning liquid was meant to be inside her. It was meant to be in her stomach, stopping her heart. She looked up at Liam. It wasn't a look of confusion anymore. It wasn't the look of a lovesick girl. It was the look of a victim, realizing she has been sleeping with the enemy. The veil was lifted. She saw the sweat on his brow, the cruelty in his mouth, the sheer panic of a predator caught in a net. "You," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, a broken thing, but in the silence of the room it carried like a bell. Liam took a step back, holding his hands up as if to ward off a blow. "Sarah, wait," he stammered, his charm failing him, his voice cracking. "It is not what it looks like. Your father, he is crazy. He put something in the glass. He is trying to frame me." Sarah gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. Her knuckles turned white. She pushed herself up. Her legs were weak, trembling violently from weeks of muscle atrophy and poison, but her will was made of iron. She fought gravity. She fought the drugs. She stood. The room watched breathless as the bride rose from her chair like a revenant. "Liar," she hissed. The word wasn't loud, but it had the weight of a tombstone. Liam flinched. "You have to listen to me, baby," he pleaded, reaching out a hand towards her. "Don't touch me," Sarah screamed. The scream tore through her throat, raw and agonized. It was the sound of a heart breaking and hardening in the same instant. She swiped his hand away with a strength I didn't know she had left. "I saw you," she cried, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the sweat of her fever. "I saw the way you looked at me when you gave me the tea. I saw it. You wanted me to drink it. You were watching me wait to die." Liam shook his head frantically. No, I love you. Love." Sarah laughed, a jagged, hysterical sound. She pointed a shaking finger at the screen where the projector was still casting the image of him kissing Patricia onto the back wall. "You love her. You love my money. You never loved me. I was just a paycheck to you." The guests finally found their voices. The shock broke, and a wave of outrage swept through the room. It started as a murmur and swelled into a roar. People were shouting, pointing, surging forward. The elite of the city, the judges, the bankers, the socialites. They were witnessing a crime so vile it offended their very souls. "Monster!" someone shouted. "Call the police!" another voice cried out. "They are already here," I boomed, my voice cutting through the din. I pointed to the waiters who were now shedding their jackets, revealing the badges and holstered weapons beneath. The room realized with a collective jolt that this wasn't just a dinner party. It was a sting. It was a trap. And it had snapped shut perfectly. Patricia, who had been tearing at the screen, slumped to the floor of the stage, sobbing. Not with remorse, but with the realization that her life of luxury was over. She looked out at the sea of hostile faces, at the police moving in, and she curled into a ball, trying to hide from the light. Liam looked around wildly. He looked at the exits, blocked by grim-faced officers. He looked at the guests, who were looking at him with pure revulsion. He looked at Sarah, who was standing tall, supported by her anger, standing on her own 2 feet for the first time in months. He realized there was nowhere to run. He realized the game was up. And in that moment, the handsome, charming entrepreneur vanished, and the coward appeared. He dropped to his knees right there in the middle of the broken glass and the fizzing poison. He clasped his hands together in a pathetic parody of prayer. "Howard, please," he blubbered, tears streaming down his face, ruining his perfect tan, I can explain. It was her. It was all Patricia. She made me do it. She is the mastermind. I just wanted to make you happy. I just wanted to help. He was selling out his partner, his lover, his fake mother, without a second of hesitation. It was the final insult, the final proof of his rot. I walked over to him, my cane clicking rhythmically on the floor. I stood over him, looking down at the top of his head. "You wanted to help?" I said, my voice cold and hard like granite. "You wanted to help yourself to my daughter's life." I turned to the police chief, who had stepped out from the shadows, handcuffs gleaming in the stage lights. "Get this trash out of my house," I said. As the officers moved in, hauling Liam to his feet, as Patricia was dragged screaming from the stage, as the guests watched in a mixture of horror and vindication. I didn't watch them go. I turned my back on them. I walked to my daughter. She was swaying, her strength fading as the adrenaline crashed. But I was there. I caught her before she fell. "I have got you," I whispered, holding her up. "I have got you." And as the chaos of the arrest swirled around us, the only thing that mattered was the steady beat of her heart against my chest, loud and strong and alive. The click of the handcuffs never came. In the split second before the metal ratchets could lock, Liam exploded with the manic energy of a cornered rat. He didn't care about the law anymore. He didn't care about the money. He only cared about hurting the people who had destroyed his illusion. With a primal scream, he threw his weight backward, slamming his elbow into the gut of the officer behind him. The cop grunted and stumbled, his grip loosening just enough. Liam didn't run for the door. He knew the exits were blocked. He lunged toward the table where the ruined legal documents lay soaking in flower water. His hand scrabbled across the wet surface and closed around the handle of the silver fruit knife that had been placed there to cut the celebratory pears. It was a small blade, only 4 inches, but it was serrated and sharp enough to open a throat. He spun around, his eyes wild, his teeth bared. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Sarah. She was standing there, weak and trembling in my arms, the perfect target for his final act of spite. "If I am going down," he shrieked, lunging forward. "I am taking this bitch with me!" The guests screamed and scattered like a flock of terrified birds. The police chief shouted a warning, reaching for his service weapon, but he was too far away. Liam was 5 feet from us. 4 feet. The knife glinted under the chandelier lights, aiming for my daughter's chest. In that fraction of a second, the last vestiges of the frail, sick old man I had pretended to be evaporated completely. The tremors vanished. The stoop in my spine disappeared. I wasn't Howard Bennett, the retired architect. I was Sergeant Bennett, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. I didn't panic. I didn't freeze. My body reacted with a muscle memory that had been dormant for 50 years, but never forgotten. I shoved Sarah behind me, using my body as a shield. At the same time, my right foot lashed out, hooking the heavy hickory cane I had dropped on the floor moments earlier. I kicked it up into the air. My hand snatched it out of its arc with a snap. This wasn't just a walking stick. I had modified it myself. The core was solid steel rod, encased in wood. It was a baton. It was a bone breaker. Liam was mid-lunge, committed to the strike. He thought he was attacking a helpless senior citizen. He didn't see the soldier until it was too late. I didn't swing wild. I stepped into his guard, pivoting on my heel. I swung the cane in a tight, vicious arc, putting the full weight of my hips behind the blow. The heavy brass head of the cane connected with Liam's forearm just below the wrist. The sound was sickeningly loud, a wet, dry crack that echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. It was the sound of the radius and ulna snapping clean in two. Liam didn't even have time to scream before the pain registered. The knife flew from his useless hand, skittering harmlessly across the marble. His arm bent at a grotesque, unnatural angle. I didn't stop there. The momentum of the strike carried the cane forward. I reversed my grip and drove the brass head into his solar plexus. Liam folded in half, the air rushing out of his lungs in a wheezing gasp. He dropped to his knees, clutching his broken arm, his face turning a shade of purple. He looked up at me, his eyes bulging, filled with shock and agony. He tried to speak, tried to breathe, but all that came out was a gurgle. I stood over him, the cane resting on his shoulder, ready to deliver a third strike if he so much as twitched. My breathing was steady. My pulse was calm. "You forgot to check the background check, son," I said, my voice low and hard. "Semper Fi." The room was frozen in stunned silence. The elite of the city, who had only ever known me as the quiet man who grew roses, stared at me with open mouths. They had just watched a 70-year-old man dismantle an attacker half his age with the efficiency of a special forces operative. Then the spell broke. "Police, get down!" The officers swarmed. 3 of them hit Liam at once, pinning him to the floor. He screamed as they wrenched his broken arm behind his back to cuff him, but I felt no pity. He had planned to stop my daughter's heart. A broken arm was a kindness. I stepped back, lowering the cane. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I turned to Sarah. She was leaning against the wall, her hands over her mouth, staring at the man writhing on the floor. She looked at me, her eyes wide. "Dad," she whispered. "What? How did you?" I just hugged her. I didn't have words. I didn't want to explain the things I had done in the jungle 50 years ago. I just wanted to make sure she was safe. The paramedics rushed in, pushing past the police. They loaded Liam onto a gurney, strapping him down as he wailed about his arm. They took Patricia, who was still screaming obscenities, out the side door. The police chief walked over to me.
He holstered his weapon and looked at the cane in my hand, then at Liam's broken arm. "Remind me never to get on your bad side, Howard," he said, a grim smile touching his lips. That was impressive. Self-defense, obviously. "Obviously," I said, leaning on the cane again, letting the old man persona slide back into place, though it didn't fit quite as well as before. He nodded. "Go with your daughter, Howard. We will handle the paperwork. These two aren't seeing the light of day for a long time." I watched them wheel Liam out. He turned his head, his eyes meeting mine one last time. There was no arrogance left, no greed, just fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. He had looked into the eyes of his prey and found a predator. I turned away. I was done with him. "Come on, sweetheart," I said to Sarah, guiding her toward the paramedics who were waiting to take her to the hospital for the detox treatment. "Let's get you out of here." As we walked out of the ballroom, leaving the shattered glass and the ruined wedding feast behind us, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The secret was out. The money was safe. But more importantly, the rot had been cut out. It had been messy. It had been violent. But the wound was clean. Now we could finally start to heal. And as I stepped into the night air, holding my daughter's hand, I knew that for the first time in a month, I would sleep without a weapon under my pillow. The war was over. We had won. The fluorescent lights of the precinct interrogation room hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz that felt a world away from the crystal chandeliers of my ballroom. But to me, this stark, windowless box was the most beautiful room in the world, because it was the cage where the animals were finally trapped. I stood on the other side of the one-way glass with Sarah. She was wrapped in a blanket, shivering slightly, not from cold, but from the aftershocks of the poison leaving her system. Her face was pale, but her eyes were dry. The tears were gone. In their place was a hard, flinty look that I recognized. It was the look of a Bennett. Inside the room, Liam and Patricia were handcuffed to the metal table. They looked small. Without the expensive clothes, without the backdrop of my mansion, stripped of their pretenses, they were just two frightened grifters caught in the headlights. I signaled to the detective. He opened the door and I walked in. I didn't need the cane anymore. I walked in with the heavy, measured tread of a man who has come to collect a debt. I tossed a thick manila folder onto the metal table. It landed with a heavy slap that made them both jump. "The game is over," I said, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. "And so are the characters you played." Liam looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "Howard, please," he rasped. "We can make a deal. I can explain." "There is no Liam," I cut him off, opening the folder. "And there is no Patricia." I pulled out a mugshot. It was 5 years old, but the face was unmistakable. Patricia looked younger, harder. Her hair dyed a cheap blonde, holding a booking slate that read, "Brenda Vance." "Brenda Vance," I read aloud, savoring the syllables. "Wanted in Florida, Texas, and Nevada for grand larceny, identity theft, and elder abuse. You have been running this game for a decade, haven't you, Brenda? Find a rich target, insert yourself as the long-lost relative or the doting mother, and bleed them dry." Patricia, Brenda, stared at the photo. The arrogance drained out of her face like water from a cracked cup. She slumped in her chair, a deflated balloon. "And you," I said, turning to Liam. I pulled out another sheet, a record of expulsions and petty crimes. Gary Wilson, college dropout, waiter, failed actor, and apparently a gigolo who specialized in seducing lonely women for access to their jewelry boxes. Liam, Gary, flinched as if I had slapped him. "You weren't a businessman, Gary," I said with cold contempt. "You were a prop. A handsome face Brenda hired to play a role. You didn't even have the brains to plan the murder. You just followed orders like a good little dog." That broke him. The insult to his ego was the key that unlocked the betrayal. "It was her!" Gary screamed, lunging as far as his handcuffs would allow, his finger pointing accusingly at Brenda. "It was all her idea! She found you! She read the article about your architectural awards! She tracked down your net worth! She told me what to say! She told me how to dress!" "Shut up, you idiot!" Brenda shrieked, her voice shrill and ugly. "Keep your mouth shut!" "I didn't want to kill her," Gary yelled over her, turning to the detective who was leaning against the wall. "I swear, she made me do it. She said if I didn't poison the girl, she would cut me out. She said she would frame me. I was scared of her." Brenda laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Scared? You were greedy. You were drooling over the money. You were the one who suggested the arsenic. You said it was faster. You wanted to be a widower by 30 so you could spend the rest of your life on a yacht." They turned on each other with the ferocity of rats in a sinking ship. They screamed accusations, dates, details. They spilled every secret, every crime, every dirty thought they had shared in the dark. They didn't care about love or loyalty anymore. They only cared about survival. They were tearing each other apart to see who could get the best plea deal. I watched them for a moment, feeling nothing but a profound emptiness. These were the people who had slept under my roof. These were the people who had broken bread at my table. They were hollow. I turned to the door. Sarah was standing there. She had come in quietly. She walked up to the table. She looked at Gary. He stopped screaming when he saw her. He looked at her with a flicker of hope, the old charm trying to reassert itself through the grime of his fear. "Sarah," he whispered. "Baby, I am sorry. I never meant to hurt you." Sarah looked at him. She didn't blink. She didn't cry. She looked at him like he was a specimen in a jar, a dead thing. "You are not Liam," she said softly. Her voice was steady, devoid of the tremors that had plagued her for weeks. "Liam was kind. Liam loved me. Liam didn't exist." Gary opened his mouth to speak, to spin another web, but she cut him off. "You killed the girl who loved you," she said. "She died the moment I saw you pour that poison." "The woman standing here, she is Howard Bennett's daughter, and she hopes you rot." She turned her back on him. It was the most powerful thing I had ever seen her do. She didn't ask for answers. She didn't ask for closure. She just erased him. "Let's go, Dad," she said, taking my arm. "I am done here." We walked out of the interrogation room, leaving the sound of their screaming and blaming behind us. The heavy steel door clanged shut, cutting off the noise, sealing them in their own private hell. We walked through the precinct, out the front doors, and into the cool night air. It was over. The poison was out of our lives. I looked at my daughter. She was scarred. She was hurt. She had a long road of recovery ahead of her, both physical and emotional. But as she looked up at the stars, I saw the steel in her spine. I saw the strength that had been dormant, forged in the fire of this betrayal.
She wasn't the naive girl I had tried to protect anymore. She was a survivor. And as we walked to the car, I knew that we would be okay. We had lost the illusion of a perfect family, but we had found the truth. And the truth, no matter how painful, was the only foundation worth building on. The roses in the garden are blooming again, bright red against the white trellis. 6 months ago, this house felt like a tomb, but today it is filled with the sound of ringing phones and busy people. Sarah is sitting at the patio table, her laptop open, reviewing case files. Her hair is short, a chic pixie cut that frames a face no longer gaunt with poison, but flushed with health and purpose. We didn't just survive the attempt on our lives, we weaponized it. We launched the Bennett Initiative last week. It is a legal defense fund and investigative service for victims of predatory marriage and elder financial abuse. Sarah runs it with a ruthlessness that makes me proud. She uses her experience to spot the wolves before they can enter the sheepfold. Just yesterday, she helped a widow in Ohio freeze her assets before a con artist could drain them. She looked at me across the desk and smiled, a real, genuine smile. And I knew that the naive girl was gone, but a formidable woman had taken her place. That evening, after the staff had gone home, I sat in my library with a glass of scotch, the good stuff. The fire was crackling in the hearth, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. On the table next to me sat the wedding album. It was heavy, bound in white leather, embossed with silver letters that spelled out, "A lie." I didn't open it. I didn't need to see the photos of Gary's fake smile or Brenda's predatory gaze. I didn't need to see my daughter looking at a monster with adoration. That history was dead. I stood up and walked to the fireplace. I felt the heat on my face. I tossed the heavy book onto the logs. It didn't catch immediately. The leather smoked and curled, resisting the end. But then the flames found the edges of the pages. I watched as the faces of the people who tried to destroy us turned black and crumbled into ash. I watched the memory of the poison burn away, leaving nothing but clean white smoke. I looked up at the portrait of Catherine hanging above the mantel. Her eyes seemed to sparkle in the firelight. "I kept my promise, Kate," I whispered. "She is safe, she is strong, and she knows the truth." I finished my drink, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. I used to think that my job as a father was to build walls to keep the bad things out. I thought my money was a shield, but I was wrong. Walls can be breached, and shields can be heavy. The only true protection is the truth. It is the only foundation that never cracks, the only structure that never falls. Trust is a beautiful thing, but it is not a gift to be handed out blindly. It is a currency that must be earned every single day. And if someone tries to pay you with counterfeit coins, you don't just walk away. You burn their bank down. I turned off the lights, leaving the fire to die down to embers. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was full of truth. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. We often believe that love requires blind faith, but I learned the hard way that true love demands eyes wide open. My daughter almost paid the ultimate price because we mistook a predator for a prince. The world is full of wolves in sheep clothing who will use your kindness as a weapon against you. Never apologize for protecting what you have built. Never feel guilty for demanding the truth, even from those closest to you. The strongest fortress is not made of stone or money, but of the courage to face reality, no matter how painful it might be. Sometimes you have to burn the fantasy to save the future. If you agree that trust must be earned and never given blindly, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where justice is served cold.